You've probably heard the same 10 plants recycled on every gardening channel. Coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, daylilies. And sure, they're fine. But if you've ever stood in your garden in late July watching everything look burned out and exhausted, you already know the problem. Most perennials bloom for 2 or 3 weeks and then check out for the season. What you actually want, what most gardeners spend years chasing, is a plant that earns its space from the last frost of spring all the way to the first hard freeze of autumn. Not 2 weeks, not a month, the entire season. Today, you're getting 10 perennials that do exactly that. And I'll be honest with you, these are not the plants you've seen in every other video. These are the ones that veteran gardeners quietly collect, the ones that show up in great gardens but almost never get talked about online. By the end of this, you'll know what they are, why they work, and exactly where to use them. Stick with me because I'm going to walk you through each plant, what it looks like, how long it actually blooms, where it thrives, and a specific tip for getting the most out of it. No fluff, just the plants and what you need to know. 1. Persicaria amplexicalis, or mountain fleece. Let's start with one that might be completely new to you. Persicaria amplexicalis, also called mountain fleece or red bistort, is perhaps the single longest blooming perennial you can grow in a temperate garden, and almost nobody talks about it. From June straight through until a hard frost kills the stems, this plant produces slender, bottle brush-like spikes of deep crimson, pink, or white flowers. Not a flush and a rest, continuous for 5 months straight. The plant itself grows into a full, lush clump, about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, with bold, heart-shaped leaves that make it look substantial even when nothing else is happening. It thrives in full sun to partial shade and handles moist soils better than most, which makes it invaluable if you have a low spot in your garden that other perennials hate. Go for the variety Firetail if you want the deepest red. If you want something softer and more elegant, Alba gives you white spikes that look incredible against dark foliage. 2. Canautia macedonica, or crimson pincushion. If you've ever seen a small, deep wine-red flower bobbing on a wiry stem and thought, "What is that?" it was probably Canautia macedonica. This plant blooms from late spring and just doesn't stop. It flowers all the way to frost in a constant, relaxed scatter of blooms on branching stems that reach about 2 feet tall. The color is extraordinary, a true burgundy crimson that pairs with almost anything and photographs beautifully. It's drought-tolerant once established, and bees absolutely love it. The informal, airy habit means it weaves through other plants naturally, without looking planted or stiff. Use it in the middle of a border where its stems can lean and mingle. Deadheading isn't mandatory, but giving it a light shear in midsummer extends the bloom even further and keeps it tidy. It will also self-seed modestly, meaning free plants every year if you let a few heads go. 3. Calamintha nepeta, or lesser calamint. You've probably never seen this at a big box garden center, and that's a shame. Calamintha nepeta is a low mounding perennial, about 18 inches tall, that covers itself in tiny white or pale lavender flowers from late spring until frost. And when I say covers itself, I mean completely. You can barely see the foliage beneath it. What makes it extraordinary isn't just the longevity, it's that bees treat this plant like it's the only food source in the neighborhood. On a sunny afternoon, a mature clump of calamintha sounds like it's humming. Bumblebees, honeybees, tiny native bees, they can't leave it alone. The foliage smells faintly minty when you brush against it, and the plant is both drought-tolerant and deer-resistant. Full sun, well-drained soil, and almost no maintenance. Plant it at the front of a border or spilling over a path edge, and it will perform every single season without asking for anything. 4. Linaria purpurea, or purple toadflax. Here's one that most gardeners walk right past at the nursery because the plant on the tag looks wispy and insubstantial. Don't make that mistake. In the ground, Linaria purpurea transforms into an upright, airy column of tiny snapdragon-like flowers in shades of purple, pink, or white, blooming from May straight through to the first hard freeze. It reaches about 3 feet tall and is extraordinarily slender, so you can plant it in groups of 3 or 5 without taking up much space. It's perfect for weaving through the middle of a border or planting in a gravel garden, where its fine texture contrasts beautifully with broad-leaved plants. Like Knautia, it self-seeds freely and reliably, so once you have it in your garden, you essentially have it forever. The variety Cannon Went is the classic pink selection. Springside White gives you clean white flowers that seem to glow in the evening light. 5. Agastache Blue Fortune, or Anise Hyssop. Agastache gets mentioned sometimes, but usually vaguely, and most gardeners don't realize that the right variety keeps blooming for months rather than weeks. Blue Fortune is the one to grow. It blooms from late June and keeps going until frost cuts it down, producing fat, upright spikes of blue-violet flowers on plants that reach about 3 feet tall. The scent of the foliage is part of the deal, a strong anise licorice fragrance that releases whenever the wind moves through or you brush against it. Hummingbirds and pollinators work it constantly. What makes Agastache genuinely underused is how heat and drought tolerant it is. This is not a plant that sulks in a dry July. It just keeps flowering. Give it full sun and good drainage, and it will outperform plants 3 times its price. 6. Gaura lindheimeri, or whirling butterflies. Now reclassified as Oenothera lindheimeri, Gaura is one of those plants that looks like it shouldn't be hardy. The flowers are so light and delicate that they seem like they'd wilt at the first challenge. But Gaura blooms from spring through to a hard freeze, handling heat, drought, and poor soil with total indifference. The flowers are small, white or pink, and they float on long, arching wands of stems that reach 2 to 4 feet tall. In a breeze, the whole plant moves like it's dancing, which is where the common name comes from. It's exceptional as a filler plant, airy enough that it doesn't block anything behind it, but present enough to provide constant movement and bloom. Gaura resents wet feet and heavy clay. Put it in well-drained soil in full sun, and it will reward you with one of the longest bloom seasons of anything in your garden.
7. Pygnanthemum muticum, mountain mint. This one is genuinely overlooked, and it deserves much better. Mountain mint blooms in midsummer and continues well into fall, but the real show starts well before the flowers open. The upper leaves near the flower heads turn a striking silver white, so bright it looks like frost settled on the tips of the stems. This silvery effect starts in late spring and persists long after the flowers finish, giving you ornamental value from spring through frost without needing the blooms to do all the work. When the small white flowers do appear, pollinators arrive in numbers that will genuinely surprise you. It's been documented as one of the highest value native pollinator plants in eastern North America. It spreads by rhizome, so give it space or contain it. But if you have a naturalistic area, a tough corner, or a rain garden that needs a workhorse plant, nothing competes with it. 8. Perennial scabiosifolia, golden lace. You might have to search for this one. It's not widely stocked, but it's worth the effort. Perennial scabiosifolia is a tall, open perennial that produces clouds of tiny golden yellow flowers on airy, branching stems from midsummer through fall. The overall effect looks like a yellow Verbena bonarensis, that same transparent, see-through quality that lets you layer it in front of taller plants without blocking the view. It's the combination of late-season color, elegant structure, and total toughness that makes it special. average soil, full sun to light shade, minimal water once established. It doesn't spread aggressively and doesn't need staking, despite reaching 4 or 5 feet in a good season. In the fall, as other things wind down, Perennia keeps going, and when paired with ornamental grasses and late-season sedums, it becomes a genuine focal point rather than a background player. 9. Penstemon digitalis Husker Red. Most people know penstemon as a short-lived perennial that blooms once and that's it. Husker Red is different. Given full sun and good drainage, it produces white tubular flowers with a pinkish blush from late spring through midsummer. And with a shear after the first flush, it rebounds and blooms again into fall. But here's what really sets it apart: the foliage. Deep burgundy maroon leaves that hold their color from the moment it emerges in spring until frost takes it. You are getting year-round ornamental value from the foliage alone, with a genuine long bloom season on top of that. It's also a North American native, fully hardy in most temperate zones, and completely unbothered by deer. Hummingbirds visit it regularly. Plant it in groups of 3 in full sun and let the burgundy leaves become a design anchor for everything planted around it. 10. Lychnis coronaria, rose campion. This one might be the most underestimated plant on this entire list. Rose campion grows as a biennial or short-lived perennial, but it self-seeds so reliably that it effectively becomes a permanent fixture in your garden without any effort from you. It blooms from late spring and keeps producing magenta pink flowers, one of the most electric colors in the plant world, on silvery white felted stems for months. The contrast between that silvery white foliage and the screaming magenta flowers is the kind of thing that stops people in their tracks. It's bold, it's almost outrageous, and it works because the silver tones it down just enough to make it feel intentional rather than accidental. It thrives in poor, well-drained soil. It handles drought. It self-seeds into gravel, cracks in paving, and dry borders that other perennials won't touch. If you have a difficult, dry spot where nothing wants to grow, drop a few rose campion plants in and let them do their thing. There you have it, 10 perennials that earn their space in your garden from the last frost of spring to the first freeze of autumn. Not 2 weeks of bloom, the whole season. These are the plants that show up in the most thoughtful, well-designed gardens, quietly doing the work that makes everything else look better. If any of these made it onto your list, drop it in the comments. I read every one. And if you're building out a low-maintenance garden that performs all season, hit subscribe, because that's exactly what this channel is about. More of these coming soon.